Hi, Elena.
Hi, Vanessa.
How are you?
I'm good. Um, One of my coworkers says I woke up so I'm winning, and I love that.
Oh, I love that. um, where are you? You're back in Miami?
Yes, I got back last week and just loving the summer here. What about you? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm also loving the summer here, but it's been super hot. Like, super hot this year. I
Yeah, I
don't know how
kind of
you're
like
dealing with
it.
that. You like it?
Yes, although I do spend a lot of time indoors on my computer, but there's
Yeah.
something about Miami in the summer, it's quieter. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like more private in a way.
Yeah, because everyone's gone.
Right. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, I get that. I like the summer better than the winter for that reason.
Mm.
But this year it's just like I walk my dog for like 20 minutes at like 7:30 a.m. and I come in and I'm like completely covered in sweat. It's like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely getting more intense. All the heat indexes are breaking records, and yeah, even the shade, because of the humidity, can only do so much. But the good thing is that during sweating, we release a lot of toxins, so it helps against Alzheimer and dementia. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise.
I've never heard that. That's so funny. I'm gonna embrace sweating now.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe dog owners in South Florida have a lower percentage of dementia compared to the normal population.
That's
I mean,
funny.
this is a total guess, not a scientific claim.
I'm gonna do some observing. Yeah. So tell me what's new. Like, so the last time you and I were working together was years ago now. DeFi trends in the crypto space. Like, tell me about what you've been up to since then.
Yeah, so it seems like a world ago. So after DeFi Trends, I traveled for a little bit, and then I started working with Entrepreneur Ready, which is an online accelerator focused specifically on early stage entrepreneurs. So I've been coaching startup founders there and organizing our events, and how a startup is, you wear many hats, working in business development. Yeah, and then in my personal life, I in 2020 I was soul searching, and I got really interested in sustainable agriculture. But I kind of put it to the side because I didn't have an official background in it and I wanted something more adjacent to what I was already doing. But earlier this year, we went to Costa Rica with some friends. We visited some eco villages and got to talk with the head permaculturist there, and visited an experimental permaculture farm where we learned a lot about resource management. And one of the guys there brought up Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web online school, which is all about soil health. And that really ignited this dormant spark within me. And so ever since then, I've really dug into the regenerative agriculture space, just trying to understand the different players. And I've started a few projects just to get my hands dirty and also, learn. And one of these projects is also a podcast that I'm launching. So there's been a lot of different moving pieces since DeFi trends.
That's really cool. You're getting your hands dirty, literally and metaphorically.
Yes. I'm not gonna skimp on a good pun.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Um, yeah, so what do you want to talk about today?
I'd love to talk about the podcast And yeah, when I saw your podcast on LinkedIn, I loved the format of it and how you just kind of took these conversations you were already having and made them visible for other people, created value. So I think that's a similar thought process behind what I'm trying to do with the podcast. So I'd love to get your thoughts and just ping pong ideas or within the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Let's dig in. First question. Do you have a name for your podcast?
Well, the current name is Seeds of Change, exploring the regenerative agriculture ecosystem by hearing from experts in the field, change makers. So that is the
Cool.
working title.
It's very long. I just wrote down Seeds of Change.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about the other one more of a subtitle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think,
So, go ahead.
yeah, the idea was that something that people can remember. But I'm also thinking, what's the searchability of that? If I was someone who's just looking for a certain topic on Spotify or aud audiobook apps, audiobook apps, podcast apps, how would my podcast come up?
Have you done like some research on that to see what other podcasts are out there?
Yeah, I have.
How does it look? What's the lay of the land?
It seems like a few of them that are out there are actually quite established and specific. So I found and have listened to a podcast that's specifically about soil health and soil regeneration. So they bring in experts that are really mostly focused on that. Um, there are another one, for example, is talking to farmers mostly and exploring different farming techniques, different experiences that people have trying these out in various ecosystems, because obviously it matters a lot what environment you have when you're trying to grow food. Um, so things of that nature, kind of picking one of the areas in the whole ecosystem and supply chain that exists in our food system all the way from the producer or even before then, companies that provide inputs to farmers all the way to the consumer and beyond. So not just think about the supply chain, but the cycle. Yeah.
Where would you So my questions will flood out of me. So feel free to like pull me back if you need to. Where do you like see your podcast falling in the ecosystem of regenerative agriculture podcasts?
Hmm.
Like topic wise, also like time wise, and like I guess we'll start there. We'll start there.
When you say time wise, what do you
Like
mean?
how long?
Okay. Um, so I guess pulling this back a little bit to what I'm thinking my goals are and my audience is. So my position right now is that I'm really excited about this space and I'm learning a ton from different people. Um, and I want to share that with other people who are also excited about this for different reasons, maybe as or one of the solutions to climate change or a personal connection with food or farming. Anyway, and so most of the listeners, I imagine, are not yet in this space and want to understand, okay, what is this even about? This buzzword regenerative agriculture is being thrown around more and more, which is exciting. But, what does it take? Who's involved? What's already happening? Um, which could be more of a gate level, gateway drug, or just an entry to then maybe going, okay, I really want to dig deeper into soil health. What's happening there? And then I think those other podcasts would be a really natural segue. So that's how I'm thinking about positioning myself in what's already out there. And I really like shorter episodes, like 30 minutes, because I love listening to podcasts on my drives. And it's cool to be able to listen to a whole episode. Maybe, there's an action item at the end, and then when I get home, I can go about my day or dig a little deeper. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? How does that land?
I think that's a pretty good start. I think shorter for beginners is definitely more accessible and like friendlier. You mentioned goals. What are your goals? Like, what is your what do you want your listeners' takeaway to be?
Yeah. Well, one thing that's not 100% clear for me right now is who exactly the listeners will be. I have an idea and a target, but I guess you never know until you get the data. So, tying into what I said earlier, I really want to highlight the stories of people who are doing real work already. So, I feel like there's one thing to read articles and hear people say buzzwords on panels or whatever. And there's another thing to put a face to a movement. So really highlighting the stories, what goes into it. For example, one of the angles is the financing part of it. So thinking about, okay, what is system investing? Are VCs getting into this? What's happening with real estate with this land? All the way to the maybe less obvious, less sexy parts of, okay, supply chain, how are we even getting this to consumers? Is there a market from wholesalers for regenerative products? So I guess taking maybe just an initial curiosity of the listener and putting some real tangible stories, people, and action steps behind what does this mean? Yeah.
Okay.
And the other part of this also is that, I would love to personally get professionally involved in the field as well. And I know a lot of people are looking to transition their careers into maybe something as broad as just climate in general, or they have a more specific idea like me, which can be a daunting task. So it's a little bit of a solidarity journey too, sharing what I'm learning, sharing the tips that I'm getting from my conversations that I'm having, and going on that journey together with the listeners. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So those are like two different things. One of them is like your journey in the career transition. The other one is like highlighting people. So you could do like, just thinking about like other podcast formats that I've heard, you could do like the same podcast, you could do like a segment at the top or something where you talk about yourself and your journey, and then you do the interview, or vice versa, you jump into the interview and at the end you do the tips, or you could like intersperse them, like once a month you do like an update on your journey, and then like it, for example, if you're going to release weekly, and then like the rest of them just do like interview, and then once a month again do the check-in, because I think those are two different things. And not to say that they won't necessarily interest your audience, but they're more of like a Venn diagram thing, like you have the people who are curious about it, and then you have the people who are actively trying to transition in, and there will probably be overlap, but that doesn't mean that it's like a circle,
Right.
Yeah. So think about that a little more, but I do think that they're both great ideas.
Do you feel like it's too unfocused to fit both of those ideas into one podcast, or it might maybe dilute?
I don't think it would be bad to put them both into the same podcast, but what I do think you should definitely consider is that if you put them together, you will kind of like, you'll like affect the timeline. So like, whereas whereas the interview part is probably evergreen, like you can just, people can go into your archives and see it and listen to it, and even if it was a year ago, it's probably still mostly relevant, but the story about you will become outdated pretty quickly. So you'll be kind of like, and not to say that it's a bad thing, but again, just like a thing to keep in mind. Like if someone is going back and listening to the archives and they see like a certain researcher or something that you spoke to a year and a half ago, and they go back and they listen, but then they have to listen to this career update about you that is not relevant to them at all because it's all the way from a year and a half ago.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Thinking about people not listening linearly or later on. Yeah, that's something to think about. And I think I like your idea of maybe tagging it on the back, or so you can stay on if that's something that applies to you or is interesting, because I do think the interview does add value to both types of listeners. But maybe the career update part is only interesting to one of them. Yeah. And then, the other part of it that I also care about is adding value to my podcast guests as well, right? So, exposing them to the kind of audience that they want to connect with, and sharing their story in a way that is relevant to what they're working on. So I think as I'm working on getting more speakers signed up for the podcast, I think that value proposition is still something that I want to fine tune.
What have you observed so far for that? Like, what do you think would be effective?
So one interesting thing that I didn't expect is that people have been super open and excited to get on a call with me and have an informational interview, and where I just get to ask all the questions that are in my mind. And I've had much less traction with the podcast idea, which surprised me, because initially the way I was thinking about it is, oh, look, this is the same amount of effort and time, but it can add value to you because it can add visibility and, be building your brand as well. So, but I'm wondering if it's maybe intimidating to some people, or feels like a bigger lift, or the value proposition isn't clear enough. So that's something that I'm curious to solve for, how to, how it can be something that just makes sense for both the speakers and for me.
Have you asked the speakers like what kind of value they would seek? Have you gotten feedback about that?
No, I have not directly asked that. I mean, I've had people ask about the audience and who would see it, or how many people would see it. So I've given some estimates based on my social media following, and the idea was to primarily, or initially at least, promote it on LinkedIn, just because that's where most of my connections are, of people who are interested or adjacent to the space, and people who, want to, are looking for information to maybe grow their careers. So far I've been mostly just, giving estimates, because we haven't launched yet, so I don't have any hard data. But I have not directly asked about the value, so that's a great note.
Yeah. So going back to the speakers, are they like researchers? Are they founders? Is it like a mix? And I can kind of help you brainstorm what might be of value, but like, who are they?
Yeah, so far I've cast a pretty wide net. I mean, a lot of people are founders, which can be different depending on their business. So I've reached out to people who are at VCs. One of the people I'm in conversation with is also running a fund. There's a founder of a vertical farming business. People who work at an NGO that educate farmers on, how to actually create a more profitable business by using regenerative practices. So it's really a little bit all over the place, which is kind of the idea also, but maybe there could be a better strategy there. I'm super open to unpacking that.
Well, my immediate thoughts are I don't know if it would necessarily be exposure for like, the product, right? Maybe a different approach to the pitch could just be more awareness, right? And like education around the why of it all. Like, why did they choose to be in this? Why do they think it's important? Why do they think other people should care? And then kind of like using that as like legs, right? Like, going to them and saying, you're doing really important work. And I would love to have you on this podcast where we primarily target people who are curious about this and may potentially even want to career pivot into this area. And you could just really help me explain why this is important and why people should care. And then, the exposure is nice on the back end. And I don't know, it depends on everyone, right? Some people want clearances, some people put out a portfolio, stuff like that. But the climate space in general, I find people are like pretty willing to talk just because they are very led by passion and they think that it's very important work. And maybe putting that at the forefront can help kind of like close that deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like appealing more to the personal why, motivator, and tying that into the work. Just, I guess, what gets people up, what gets people to work every day. What, from your perspective and with your podcast, what have you seen in your experience? What gets people excited to jump on? How did you immediately have that angle, or did you workshop it after the first few episodes? What was your
I
experience?
workshopped it a little bit, but honestly, like I was having these conversations anyway. And I mean, through my co-work space and my community, like I'm plugged into so many founders or early stage founders. And I have so much experience with like leading teams and doing strategic work that, yeah, it was just like, I'll just have a conversation with you. I'll give you like, you know, 20 to 45 minutes of like a free strategic marketing focused brainstorm. And then I'll tag you, and then I also give them the files. I'm like, you can use this too. The nice thing is with this software, it automatically creates clips. The clips that I use are obviously the ones where I'm like talking and like, you know, giving my point of view on stuff. But it'll also often give me whole clips where it's just my guest speaking about what they're doing, why they're doing it, that kind of thing. And then I'll give those to the guests too. And I'm like, use this. Here you are on a podcast talking to me, you know? It's a different perspective. So, yeah, that's kind of how I did it. But I'm taking a much more like a less structured, more relaxed approach to this podcast. This is just a for fun kind of thing that I'm doing, just because I really enjoy having these conversations. I like, why not share them, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And have you gotten feedback from people who've listened to it?
Yeah, people like it. It's pretty good. People tend to only listen to the clips, which is fine. I have the full things on YouTube, but I release the interview pieces in clips, and people just listen to the clips, and then they'll be like, wow, this is really valuable. It's like a little hack. I'm like, yeah, perfect. That's how I like to consume content too, you know? It's just in little bursts. So why not format it like that, you know?
You're like doing the TikTok
like
real
the
motion.
TikTok scrolling. Yeah, that's how you do
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
That's how I do a lot of learning. No, I mean, like it depends on what I'm doing, but like, that is how I learn a lot of stuff nowadays. I'll just like be on TikTok and I'll be like, oh, this is super interesting. Let me learn more about this super obscure thing for 3 minutes.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of exposure
Hmm.
learning almost. Just like, okay, what catches my interest? And then where do you want to dig deeper? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. I definitely love the idea of posting clips. We actually kind of do something similar at my work right now at the accelerator, where we have guest speakers come in for longer sessions, and then we clip some powerful moments and send them to the guest speakers and use them on our social media. So that's been super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good format. And things are becoming increasingly video led as well.
Hmm.
So, just making sure that you have that too. Um, but yeah, but getting back to your guests, so we can angle it with like the why and stuff, but then also make sure that you ask them um, what call to action they want, right? Because you can say I want you to be a guest on my podcast and I basically want to talk about what you're doing, but largely more than that, because you don't want to get super technical on a beginner level podcast, right? You want to kind of explain what they're doing, but mostly explain why it's important. Maybe a little bit of how they do it, but let's see like why it's important, why people should care, why they care. Um, and then just, making sure that you leave room for their call to action. How can my listeners help you? Or what do you need next to reach your next goal? And just like, I find that asking that, like, whether or not something actually comes of it, just kind of like creating space for that ask and letting people share whatever it is that they need tends to tends to really help as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to be able to amplify their work and their impact, in any way. So that would be super exciting. So
Yeah,
I definitely want to have something actionable or, tangible at the end.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And have you done research on like growing a podcast and stuff?
Um, a little bit of research, but I've been really focused right now on setting it up and getting a list of speakers that would be interested in, seeing how I'm connected to them, reaching out, things like that. I assume you have some thoughts about growing a podcast.
I mean, it is a lot of work, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, choose your platforms. Again, another thing that I like about this software is that it's pretty easy to optimize. Like, you can do video, audio, or you could just do audio, and then it shapes the video for you. So for whatever format
Mm.
you want, it'll do like vertical, it'll do horizontal. So making those decisions, but yeah, a lot of I think personal outreach at first will also be helpful. And I think that, and this is just off the top of my head, but I think that as you get started, something that would be like really massively valuable would be if you, once you start your first handful of episodes or whatever, like personally send them to friends of yours who are kind of in your same situation, who are like curious, looking to learn, maybe in a career pivot, and ask them for feedback for you, but also for the speaker, And then that way you can go back to the speaker and say, I got this feedback from my very first listeners. Like, thank you so much for your time. This is the feedback I got. This is what they thought about what you said. And then you can just kind of provide it that way. And then you can be like, do you know anyone who might want to be on my podcast? Give them that and then make another ask. I think might be a good way to like start snowballing that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I love asking for referrals, but feedback, I like the idea of, doing non-scalable things at the beginning to really get traction, to get the momentum and the input, I mean, that's invaluable. Because I guess most of what I have on paper now are all assumptions, assuming people are interested in XYZ, etc. So I love that idea of getting, like we also say at our accelerator, getting rapid feedback from people that I know are going to listen because they're interested and they care about me.
Yeah, exactly. That quick feedback loop that could be beneficial to you, but yeah, also the speaker. I think about all the times that I've been on a podcast, guest on a podcast, and I never hear back after it's been sent, after the interview. I never really hear back. What did the audience think? What was the listener numbers? And not to say that you need to share that, but if you could say, oh, I shared this with a couple friends of mine, and like, they are really interested in your project. They thought you're doing really great work, and they thought that it was super interesting when you said X, Y, and Z. Like, thank you so much for coming on and like adding that value for my audience.
Yeah, for sure.
Simple stuff like that.
So, what are you, just going back to picking your platform? I mentioned earlier that I was thinking about LinkedIn as the primary platform. Um, Also, to be honest, because I'm not really on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook anymore. So, I would consider going back there because for this. But personally, I'm not that involved in social media anymore. Um, so because I'm mostly only on LinkedIn, I've only seen your stuff on LinkedIn. What do you think about LinkedIn as a platform for this? I don't see
I
too
think,
much video content on LinkedIn right now.
yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. So on the one hand, the reason that I chose LinkedIn is because my audience is there, right? Like business owners, entrepreneurs. That audience is on LinkedIn. So that's one reason. But the other reason is my content is like work related, right? Like it can be helpful for you in your job. So that's why I think LinkedIn is a good place for it. Also, LinkedIn, just like all other algorithms, is prioritizing video because that's just where the user trends are going, right? Everything's becoming short form vertical video. Like Instagram is pushing it with reels, YouTube added shorts, like TikTok, obviously everyone's just following what TikTok is doing. So LinkedIn is no different. LinkedIn is also going to be prioritizing video as well. So that's another reason why I've decided to put video content on LinkedIn. I feel like nobody does it. That's one of the reasons I'm doing it, because this is an opportunity to like make the algorithm work for me. And it has, like my first post about this got like 1,000 impressions, which was crazy,
Amazing.
And it's like so simple. I literally just throw it out there and it just gets so many impressions. So that was why I chose that. So I would say that you could also start there because of the same thing, right? Your target audience is people who are curious about something, potentially for a career change, or it could be relevant to them in their current career. So I think that it could help there. Yeah, my thoughts on the video, remain the same. But then I would say, see if you can dig a little bit deeper into the actual demographics of who you're going to reach, right? So like off the top of my head, it seems to me like one target audience could be like you, right? Which is like millennial. Millennials are in their age range where they might be doing a career change, or also Gen Z coming out of college, or people who are in college who are looking and curious about, for example, getting into a career in climate, might be curious about this. So that could also be the beginning of the career, could also be another target audience. Obviously, that's like totally different generation, different trends, different age. But you can like see which one of those might fit you more and then see where they are, right? If you're like, okay, I'm going to target this millennial pivot audience, career pivot audience, LinkedIn is probably still a solid bet. But if you're like, I think I might want to target the people who are at the beginning of their career, then probably TikTok, right? starting there. And it's not to say that you can't do both, because like I said, the software that I'm using really easily allows me to create video clips and export them in all sorts of different sizes. So it's just a matter of like making them and then exporting them in the right size and then sending them to wherever they're going to go. So you could do both, but those are just things to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Where's your target market already at? Sounds like is what you're saying. And more. But yeah, thinking about getting onto TikTok is exciting too, because I feel like it could be a lot of fun. But I do want to be focused and not put too much on my plate where it's inhibitive. So maybe I'll start with one of the two audiences and see what happens when I start putting videos up on LinkedIn and who responds well to it, and then see if I want to expand, which, as you said,
Yeah.
might not be so hard with certain softwares.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it really does come down to what works for you, right? What's sustainable for you. Like, we could sit here and lay out a whole plan where you're going to be posting every single day and you're going to be on all these different platforms, and then you'll burn yourself out in 2 weeks and then the project is dead in the water. So it really does come back to what works for you. Like I said, I'm taking a super relaxed, non-strict approach to this, and that's really working for me. I have these conversations, then I post like once a week, and then that's just working for me, and I'll change it in the future if I need to. But yeah, just kind of putting it out there, seeing what resonates, right? And then going from there. If it makes sense to expand, if it makes sense to try something new.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, just starting sometimes is the best strategy.
Yeah.
So where does this fit into your, I mean, I don't know, you said it's mostly for fun that you're doing this podcast. Um, are you consulting with businesses? Are you working full time somewhere? Are you looking to have this be part of your career? Or is it more something that excites you and you just want to share with the world?
Yeah, it's
Is it allowed to
mostly.
ask questions to the interviewer?
Yes, is putting me on the spot.
I'm just
um,
curious.
no,
Yeah.
no, no, it's totally fine. Yeah, so I'm consulting currently. I like work with different clients, but this is the kind of stuff that I really enjoy doing, right? I really enjoy this top level strategic stuff. I enjoy brainstorming and putting together plans. Um, and stuff like that. This is like partly for brand building and like showing people what I can do, because I my theory is that if I put myself forward doing the types of things that I think I'm good at and that I enjoy doing, then I will get more work like that. So that's kind of like the whole thing behind this. And then also, I just enjoy it. I enjoy these kinds of conversations. I really love talking to people, hearing about what they're building and what they're thinking about, and just helping put together, like, just filling in the gaps of my knowledge, right? Because I've been doing marketing for so long, and everything I think about is you could put anything in front of me, and I'd be like, well, this is a buzzword. So how are they even going to market this? I have those thoughts all the time when people say stuff to me. So it's just bringing that kind of information forth to people. This is how, I don't know, it's just what I enjoy, and how I feel like I can help people like really cut through noise, and be strategic and create real value.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, in our conversation, you brought up so many questions that made me think, and I want to go back after our call and ask my speakers what value they want, and get get focused, get people's feedback, and implement what we talked about. So I'm super excited. I'm even more excited now about my podcast after we were talking about it.
Yes, hey, I love
So
that. I love bringing that to you.
yeah, so thank you. I really appreciate this chat.
You're welcome. I really appreciate your time. And we can always circle back, let me know, bring me updates. And I'm always happy to chat more, If you flesh out a plan and you want to go through it, just let me know. You have my contact.
I'll know who to call.
You know who to call?
Yeah, and let me know if there's any, you know, feedback from your listeners, as you said. It's always fun.
I will. I will, for sure. Oh, well, thank you, Elena. Do you have any final questions?
I think so. I think I have, as I mentioned, some stuff to process, some stuff to put into action. So I'm super excited to hone in and just get started.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm happy I was able to help, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So
Yes,
thank
me
you.
too. Thank you as well. Have a
I'll
wonderful
talk to you
summer
later.
and, 4th of July trip. I hope it's
Thank
restful
you.
and enjoyable. Enjoyful. All
And
right.
joyful.
It's that time of the day.
I get it. I get it. Take care, Elena. I'll talk to
You
you later.
too. Bye.
Bye.